The galaxy had forgotten the name of Earth. Once it had been the heart of human civilization, a world full of cities that touched the clouds and oceans that reflected the stars. But time was cruel. Wars, greed, and disasters had broken humanity. Slowly, the blue planet that once shined bright among the stars faded into silence. For centuries, the great powers of the galaxy believed humanity was gone. The Alien Alliance, a council made of many ancient races, wrote the same sentence in their records. The human species is extinct. To them, it was simply another story of rise and fall, one among thousands. But the truth was different. Far from the ruined solar system, a single ship drifted through the endless dark. Its name was Ark of Dawn, a last attempt to save a dying species. Inside the ship, a few thousand survivors slept in cryo-chambers, their dreams frozen in time. The ship had been launched during Earth's final years, when nations had stopped fighting and started praying. It carried the last hope of humanity. Not soldiers or kings, but farmers, engineers, teachers, and children. For 100 years, the Ark wandered. Its engines weakened, its power faded, but it never stopped. Guided by an old navigation system, it finally reached a planet, Erebus IV, a cold and barren world orbiting a dim red star. The ship landed with a crash, half of its hull buried in ice. When the cryo-chambers opened, the people stepped out and saw their new home. The sky was red, the air thin, and the land frozen. It was not the paradise they had hoped for. But it was life. And for them, life was enough. Among them was Commander Lena Ortiz, a woman once trained as a starship officer. Her uniform was torn, her hands scarred, but her spirit remained unbroken. She looked at the frozen horizon and said quietly, "We start here." The survivors built shelters from the wreckage of the Ark. They learned to melt the ice for water, to grow food in underground caverns, and to use the ship's remaining reactors for power. Every day was a fight against cold, hunger, and exhaustion. Many gave up hope. Some whispered that the galaxy had truly forgotten them, but Lena refused to believe that. She gathered her people in the main hall of the old ship, where the Earth flag still hung, torn but visible. "We are not ghosts," she told them. Her voice echoed through the steel walls. "We are the reminder that humanity never dies quietly." The people listened in silence. Her words were simple, but they carried fire. From that moment, the survivors changed. They began to work not for survival, but for something greater, for the return of their name among the stars. They rebuilt broken machines, repaired communication systems, and taught their children about the world they had lost. Every night they told stories of oceans, mountains, and cities that once glowed with life. Children who had never seen Earth began to dream of it. Years passed. The colony grew slowly. The frozen tunnels became warm with light. The people learned to adapt to the planet's storms and seasons. They built wind towers that reached above the ice, collecting energy from Erebus's strong winds. The once empty land began to show signs of life again. Still, the people of Erebus IV never forgot where they came from. Every year they gathered around the old ship and celebrated Earth Day. They played old recordings of music, laughter, and the sound of rain. Many cried when they heard it, for none of them had ever seen rain. Commander Ortiz grew older, but she continued to lead. She trained younger generations to take her place, teaching them the old values: courage, unity, and compassion. She told them, "One day we will rise again, and when the stars hear our name, they will remember what it means to be human." But not everyone in the galaxy was blind. Far away, deep in the space between stars, an alien listening post detected a strange signal. It was weak and broken, but clearly artificial. The code was ancient, human in origin. The operators, a species called the Cathari, were puzzled. They thought it must be an error. After all, humans were supposed to be extinct. The signal came again, stronger this time. It was a simple transmission, a repeating message sent across the void. "To any who hear this, humanity endures." The Cathari reported it to their superiors, but the Alliance Council laughed. "A ghost," they said. "A trick of the machines." They closed the report and forgot about it, but the Cathari technicians didn't. They listened again, and they heard something behind the static. A voice, faint, determined, human. On Erebus IV, Commander Ortiz stood before the transmission array. Her team had finally repaired the old system after decades of work. When the signal went out, she smiled for the first time in years. "Even if no one hears us," she said, "the stars will know we are here." Her people cheered. For them, it wasn't about being found. It was about being remembered. The message traveled through the endless dark, crossing forgotten sectors and empty systems. It touched worlds where humans had once lived and died. It bounced off satellites covered in dust and passed through ruins of old colonies. It was the whisper of a species that refused to fade. Weeks later, a young technician among the Cathari replayed the recording again and again. The human voice was calm and clear. "We are survivors of Earth. We live. We remember. And we will rise." The technician felt something he didn't understand: admiration. He shared the clip with others, and slowly the message began to spread. Across the Alliance, scholars and explorers started to ask questions. Could humanity truly have survived? Meanwhile, on Erebus Thur, life went on. The colony had grown into a small city, built beneath the ice where warmth and air could be controlled. Artificial sunlight lit the underground gardens. Children laughed as they ran through the corridors. Old songs echoed in the halls, songs of Earth. One evening, Lena Ortiz stood on the surface looking at the stars. The wind howled across the frozen plains. She could see the faint light of the red sun setting behind the mountains. Her breath formed clouds in the cold air. She thought about Earth, a place she had never seen since she was young. A place that was gone, yet alive in every story, every dream. Maybe they'll never come. One of her officers said quietly beside her. "Maybe no one will ever hear us," Lena smiled. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that we remember who we are." The officer nodded, watching as she raised the old Earth flag on a steel pole. It fluttered weakly in the icy wind. Far above them, beyond sight, the faint human signal continued its journey through space. It would take years, maybe centuries, to reach another civilization. But it would reach, and when it did, the galaxy would hear the truth. Humanity was not finished. It was only waiting. On that frozen world beneath a red sky, a forgotten species took its first step back toward the stars. They were small, cold, and weary, but their spirit burned brighter than ever. For even at the end of all things, humanity still whispered the same promise to the universe. We endure. We adapt, we rise, and in that promise, hope lived once more. Years had passed since the Ark of Dawn landed on Erebus IV. What was once a small camp of survivors had become a living city under the ice. They called it New Hope, a name that reminded every human why they had endured. The people of Erebus had changed. They were stronger, wiser, and united by a single dream: the return of humanity to the stars. They had built warm tunnels of light beneath the frozen surface, where crops grew under lamps and machines hummed gently through the endless cold. Children born on Erebus had never seen the blue sky of Earth, but they carried its memory through stories told by their elders. Every evening, when the red sun faded, families gathered around glowing screens to watch old Earth recordings. Oceans, forests, cities, and faces smiling in sunlight. Many of those recordings were damaged, but even the broken pieces were treasures. They reminded the people that they came from something beautiful. Commander Lena Ortiz was gone now, her name honored in songs and stories. Her great-granddaughter, Ariana Ortiz, now led the colony. She had inherited her ancestors' courage and calm strength. Under her leadership, New Hope became more than a colony. It became a civilization reborn. Ariana stood on the observation deck one day, looking through a glass dome at the faint stars above. She spoke softly to her council. "Our ancestors built ships that touch the stars. We will do it again." The engineers and scientists worked tirelessly. Using the old technology from the Ark and combining it with the minerals of Erebus, they began to build small ships, not for war but for exploration. These ships were fragile, but they represented something powerful: belief. The first ship was called the Spirit of Earth. When it launched, every citizen of New Hope gathered to watch. The engines roared, the ice cracked beneath its power, and as it rose into the red sky, people cheered, waving the flag of humanity. Children shouted, "We're going home!" Though none of them had ever seen that home. The Spirit of Earth traveled only to nearby moons, gathering data and testing old navigation systems. But even that small journey felt like a miracle. For the first time in centuries, humans were flying among the stars again. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, whispers began to spread among the alien worlds. The Cathari listening stations had received more strange transmissions. Each one carried the same human signature: Stronger this time, clearer. Messages filled with hope and memory. One Cathari scholar named Selna became fascinated. She had studied ancient human culture in the old archives of the Alliance. Humans, she read, were known for their creativity and resilience. She couldn't believe they had truly vanished. So she replayed the signals again and again. When she decoded the newest message, her scaled fingers trembled. The words were simple. "We remember what you forgot." Selna shared the message with her colleagues. Many laughed at her curiosity. "It's only an echo," they said. A recording from centuries ago. But Selna wasn't convinced. The signal was too organized, too alive. She petitioned the Alliance Council to send a scout mission to investigate. The Council refused at first. Humans were not important anymore, they said. The galaxy had moved on. Still, rumors grew. Small trader ships began reporting sightings. Strange vessels, human in design, seen near abandoned colonies. They never attacked. They only observed, repaired old satellites, and vanished again into the dark. The galaxy began to feel uneasy. Back on Erebus 4, Ariana and her people continued to push forward. They had rediscovered fragments of old data archives buried deep in the Ark's memory core. The records contained messages from old Earth scientists, words, blueprints, and ancient plans. One word appeared again and again. Reclaim. It became a rallying cry. Reclaim knowledge. Reclaim honor. Reclaim humanity's place among the stars. Soon the colony's engineers built more ships. Faster, stronger, capable of traveling between systems. They called them the Dawncrafts. Each ship carried a piece of Erebus's red stone embedded in its hull, a symbol of where their rebirth began. Ariana selected a crew for the first interstellar voyage. The mission's goal was to find other survivors, if any existed. Before departure, she addressed her people. Her speech was simple but powerful. "We are children of a lost world, but not of a lost spirit. We go not to conquer, but to remember. Every step we take beyond this sky is a step toward home." When the fleet lifted off, Erebus's red sky glowed with flame. People watched until the ships became dots among the stars. Days turned into weeks as the explorers traveled beyond their home system. They passed dead worlds and silent satellites. Then one day they found something. A small moon station, still active after all these years. The crew landed carefully and discovered old human symbols on its surface. Inside, they found records from the past, messages from another group of survivors. It seemed that humanity had not vanished entirely. Other colonies had been scattered far and wide before Earth's fall. Some had perished, but others might still live. The discovery spread hope like wildfire through New Hope. Humanity was not alone after all. The Alliance, however, was no longer ignoring the signs. The Council called an emergency meeting. They viewed the human transmissions again, listened to the voices, and analyzed the recovered data. The conclusion was clear. Humanity had returned. The older members of the Council were troubled. "Humans were unpredictable," said one. "They brought both innovation and chaos." Another added, "If they survived, they must not be allowed to disrupt the balance." But younger races in the Alliance felt differently. They admired the humans, beings who had risen from extinction, building life from nothing. Many secretly began to support them. Selna, the Cathari scholar, volunteered to travel to Erebus 4 to make contact. The Council denied her request, fearing the humans might awaken dangerous ambition. Yet Selna knew that history could not be stopped. The humans would reach them soon enough. Back on Erebus 4, Ariana's fleet returned, carrying more than data. They brought back seeds, metals, and old technology. The colony began to grow faster than ever. Schools opened, new cities formed, and trade networks expanded among the stars. Humanity's knowledge increased at an incredible rate. They created clean energy sources, repaired lost star maps, and even began to decode faster-than-light travel once again. But what made them truly different was not their machines. It was their heart. Every innovation, every discovery, was guided by a single promise written on the walls of the main hall. "We rise together." Unlike the past, humanity did not fight over power or territory. They worked as one family. They remembered the mistakes of old Earth and swore never to repeat them. Each ship that launched into space carried a small silver plaque engraved with Lena Ortiz's words. We are not ghosts. We are the reminder that humanity never dies quietly. One quiet night, Ariana stood outside the dome of New Hope. The stars shimmered faintly, and the frozen land below reflected their light. She thought about her ancestor Lena and smiled. "We did it," she whispered. "You said the stars would remember us. Maybe they finally do." At that moment, far away in the void, a Cathari exploration ship caught sight of a human vessel. The two ships stared at each other across the silence of space. No weapons, no words, only curiosity. Then slowly the human ship sent a transmission. A single phrase appeared on the alien screen. "We remember what you forgot." Selna, who was aboard the Cathari ship, stared in awe. The humans were real. They were alive. And they had returned from the impossible. She smiled softly and said, "Welcome back, humans." The message traveled fast, echoing through the networks of the galaxy. The Alliance could no longer deny it. Humanity had risen from the ashes stronger than ever. And though they did not yet know it, their return would change the galaxy forever. The message had spread like fire through the galaxy. "We remember what you forgot." It was short but powerful, a declaration that humanity had returned. Every race in the Alliance had heard it. Some were afraid. Others were curious. But most simply could not believe it. How could a species thought extinct for centuries rebuild itself from nothing? Yet deep in the cold systems beyond the known trade routes, the truth was unfolding. Humanity was no longer hiding. They were building. On Erebusir, the underground city of New Hope had become the heart of a new civilization. The tunnels had grown wider, filled with bright lights and the sounds of life. There were schools, research labs, and even gardens where plants from old Earth now grew. The people had learned how to turn the frozen planet into a home. Every wall carried symbols of Earth, oceans, mountains, and birds that no one there had ever seen but everyone dreamed of. At the center of it all stood a tall woman in a silver coat, Captain Elias Vorn. He was not born during the time of Lena Ortiz or Ariana, but he carried their spirit. Vorn had once been a mechanic, fixing broken systems in the colony's ships. Now he commanded the human fleet, a fleet called the Dawn Vanguard. Each ship in the Vanguard was built from metal mined on Erebus, designed by generations of engineers and powered by determination more than technology. They were not the largest ships in the galaxy, nor the fastest, but they carried something no other fleet had: a purpose. Their mission was simple: find every lost human world. Bring them home. Captain Vorn stood on the bridge of his ship, the Spirit of Hope, watching the stars beyond the glass. The crew around him worked quietly, their movements smooth and confident. "Navigation ready?" he asked. "Ready, Captain," replied Lieutenant Marine, a young officer with bright eyes. Vorn nodded. "Set course for the Helios Belt. There were human colonies there once. Let's see if anyone's still listening." As the engines roared to life, Erebus shrank behind them, a small red light fading into darkness. The fleet moved together, dozens of ships cutting through the void like silver arrows. The journey was not easy. Many of the star maps from old Earth were gone, corrupted by time. Some routes led to nowhere. Others ended near dead worlds where silence ruled. But then, after weeks of travel, they found it. A planet called Ceres Prime, one of the last colonies humanity had built before the fall. When the fleet entered orbit, they saw ruins covering the surface. Once the planet had cities, trade, and light. Now it was silent and dark. But their sensors showed something unexpected. Faint energy readings. "Life signs," Marine said softly. Captain Vorn ordered a landing team. When they touched the ground, they found people, thin, pale, but alive. Generations of survivors had been living in underground shelters, waiting for rescue that never came. When they saw the human flag on Vorn's uniform, they fell to their knees. "You came," one of them whispered. "We thought we were forgotten." Vorn smiled gently. "No one is forgotten." The rescue mission lasted weeks. The Vanguard repaired the old colony's reactors, rebuilt the water systems, and brought medicine and food. When they left, they didn't just save a few hundred survivors, they brought back hope. Word spread again. Humanity was no longer a myth. The lost race had become the rising kind. The Alliance Council met in secret, discussing what to do. Some feared humanity would seek revenge for the past, Others argued that the humans were not conquerors, they were rebuilders. The council decided to send an envoy, and this time, it was Selna, the Cathari scholar who had long believed in them. Her ship entered the Erebus system after months of travel. The humans welcomed her with open arms, curious and cautious but not hostile. She was the first alien to step on Erebus in over 300 years. Captain Vorn greeted her at the city gates. "Welcome to New Hope," he said with a respectful nod. Selna looked around in wonder. "You built all this? On a frozen world?" "We built it because we had to," Vorn replied. "When everything is gone, the only thing left to do is rise again," she smiled. "Then you truly are as remarkable as the old record said." That night, a great gathering was held in her honor. Humans and Cathari shared stories, food, and laughter. For the first time in centuries, a bridge formed between species that had once lived in fear of each other. Days later, Selna stood beside Vorn on a hill overlooking the colony. "The Alliance will know you are real now," she said. "Some will welcome you, some will not." Vorn looked at the distant stars. "Let them come. We're not here to fight. We're here to build." "Build what?" she asked. "A future," he replied simply. "For everyone, not just humans." Selna nodded slowly, realizing that humanity's return would not bring war, but change. Months turned into years. The human fleet continued its missions, traveling farther each time. They rediscovered lost stations, derelict ships, and colonies buried under dust. On each world, they raised the flag of Earth once more. Some alien traders began working with them, exchanging materials and knowledge. They were surprised by how fair and honest the humans were. Humans didn't demand power, they offered cooperation. They repaired old trade routes, reopened communication lines, and even helped other struggling species rebuild their homes. Wherever they went, people said the same thing. The humans came, and everything changed. The turning point came when a new threat appeared, a spreading void storm that consumed systems without warning. It wasn't a weapon, but a natural disaster born from unstable space currents. Entire worlds were being cut off. The Alliance could not stop it. Their fleets were too far apart. Their cooperation too weak. Then, without being asked, the humans acted. Captain Vorn and the Vanguard positioned their ships along the path of the storm, building stabilizers to redirect its flow. They risked everything, their ships, their lives, to protect not just human worlds, but alien ones too. When the storm finally ended, the galaxy watched in silence. Systems that would have been destroyed were safe because of them. A few weeks later, the Alliance Council called for a broadcast across all known space. Every screen, every station, every communicator lit up with the image of a human face, Captain Vorn standing before the world. He spoke calmly, his voice steady. "You thought humanity ended when Earth fell. But Earth was never our home, it was our beginning. We learned, we failed, and we rose again. Not to rule, not to take, but to remind the stars that even when everything is lost, hope can still be built." Billions listened. Some wept, some felt inspired. And for the first time in centuries, the word human was spoken with pride, not fear. Selna stood beside the other council members, her eyes shining. "They have returned," she said softly. "And they have become something greater than we ever imagined." From that day forward, the Alliance no longer saw humanity as ghosts of the past. They saw them as a symbol, proof that no darkness is final and no end is truly the end. On Erebus 4, the people celebrated for 7 days and nights. Lights filled the ice tunnels, songs echoed through the domes, and children danced beneath holograms of stars. They knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had risen from the ashes, but there was still one journey left, the journey home. Captain Vorn looked out at the stars, his reflection shining in the glass. "Next," he said quietly, "we go back to Sol." His crew nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Earth and their lost cradle was waiting. And though it was far and broken, it was still theirs. For the first time in 1,000 years, humanity had the strength to return. They were no longer the lost kind. They were the rising kind, and the stars were finally listening. The journey to Sol was unlike any the human fleet had ever undertaken. For centuries, Earth had been a memory, a story, a song, a longing passed down from one generation to the next. Now Captain Elias Vorn and the Dawn Vanguard were taking the final step. They were returning home, The fleet had grown since its first missions. Ships built from the metals of Erebus IV carried crews trained in both survival and exploration. Children who had been born under red skies now sailed among the stars, their laughter echoing through the corridors of starships. The humans who had once been thought extinct were alive, united, and ready to reclaim their place. As the fleet passed through distant systems, every planet they visited sent messages of encouragement. Some alien worlds offered resources, supplies, and guidance. Many species had watched humanity rise from nothing and felt inspired. The humans were no longer alone, and the galaxy was beginning to understand their strength. Captain Vorn stood on the bridge of the Spirit of Hope, staring at the starlit path ahead. The holographic maps displayed the solar system, Sol at its center, a pale yellow sun surrounded by a ring of planets, some thriving, some ruined. Earth was the last, and it lay in silence, scarred from centuries of neglect and disaster. "Coordinates locked," Lieutenant Marine said. "We are entering the system." Vorn nodded. "Prepare the landing teams. This is what we've trained for. This is why we survived." The first view of Earth through the observation windows was sobering. The oceans were gray and clouded with debris. Cities were broken, overgrown, or washed away. The forests and mountains that had been the pride of humanity were gone, replaced by silent plains and cracked terrain. Yet even in this brokenness, Vorn felt hope. "Home," he whispered. "It's still home." The fleet approached cautiously. Communication systems, long silent, were reactivated. Old satellites that had survived the centuries flickered back to life under careful calibration. The humans of the Vanguard sent signals, not weapons. They broadcast messages across the planet. "We are here. We remember. We have returned." In scattered shelters across Earth, humans who had survived the collapse listened. Some had grown old. Some had been children when the world fell. Tears ran down faces that had thought they would never see another human. Slowly they stepped out, guided by the voices from the sky. On Erebus IV, families watched the progress live on holographic displays. Children pointed at the images of their ancestral home. "We're going there," they said, hearts full of anticipation. When the landing teams touched Earth's surface, the first footprints in centuries pressed into cracked soil. Captain Vorn and his crew moved carefully, mindful of the fragile ecosystem. They carried machines to clean water, equipment to repair shelters, and seeds brought from Erebus to begin restoring life. Children ran among the ruins, laughing with joy. Elder survivors embraced them, unable to speak, tears streaking their faces. Humanity had come home. Ariana Ortiz, now an advisor to the fleet, spoke softly as she watched the first green shoots of new plants push through broken ground. "We can make it grow again," she said. "We can rebuild what was lost." The task was enormous. The oceans were polluted, cities were half buried, and the air was thick in some regions. Yet humanity had a strength that nothing could destroy. They built robotic machines to clear debris, terraformers to purify water and soil, and energy towers to bring power to the broken cities. For months, crews worked tirelessly. Every repaired building, every plant that grew was a victory. And the humans worked together, not only among themselves but with alien allies who had come to witness and aid their rebirth. One morning, after many weeks of labor, the first new garden sprouted in Central Park, once the heart of New York City. Children planted seeds, elders watered them, and the cameras of the Dawn Vanguard recorded the moment. "Life returns," Captain Vorn said, watching the green leaves push through dark soil. "Even the smallest things matter." The Alliance watched Earth closely. For centuries they had assumed humanity was extinct. Now they could see the truth. Humanity had not returned to conquer, to fight, or to take power. Humanity had returned to restore. The Cathari scholar Selna observed the progress with wonder. "They are not like any species we have known," she said. "They rise from nothing, and they lift everything around them. They are proof that life itself can endure." Selna sent messages back to the Alliance Council, urging understanding and cooperation. Slowly, the leaders of the galaxy began to recognize the humans not as a threat, but as a force of hope. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human population grew quickly. Survivors of scattered colonies joined the crews from Erebus IV. Together they built schools, hospitals, and cities. They restored communications and began recording the history of humanity's survival. Every story, every memory was saved so that no one would forget how they had endured. The youngest generation, born on Erebus and Earth alike, learned the lessons of the past. They were trained not only in science and exploration, but in empathy and cooperation. Humanity was not just surviving, it was evolving. Ships of the Dawn Vanguard traveled across the planet, reaching abandoned regions and connecting them. Communities formed where there had been nothing but ruins. Trees were planted and fresh water began to flow through rivers again. For the first time in centuries, the sound of laughter, music, and life filled the air. Then came the moment that would be remembered across the galaxy. The humans on Earth, joined by their allies, transmitted a single message to every listening world. We are home, and we are ready to share it with all who seek life, hope, and peace. The message traveled faster than anything had before, reaching planets, moons, and stations far beyond the Sol system. Aliens who had watched humanity grow felt inspired, humbled, and amazed. Captain Vorn stood before the new Earth Council, a gathering of humans and allies from many worlds. We return not to claim, but to remember, he said. Earth is our home, but the galaxy is our family. We will rebuild together. As months passed, the planet began to bloom. Gardens, forests, and rivers reappeared. Cities rose from the ashes with careful planning and respect for the environment. Humanity had learned from the mistakes of the past. Their cities were designed to live with nature, not against it. Children played in streets where once there had been rubble. Teachers told stories of old Earth and Erebus fur. Scientists worked with engineers to explore new technologies that would protect the planet. Humanity was not just surviving, it was thriving. The Alliance, watching from afar, could not help but marvel. Humanity had returned from extinction, united and stronger than any had expected. They had faced impossible odds and had not only survived, but also inspired hope across the galaxy. Selna, standing on a Cathari observation ship above Earth, turned to her companions. They thought it was over, she said quietly, but they were wrong. Humanity has proved them wrong. Captain Vorn walked through one of the newly rebuilt cities, watching the people laugh, work, and dream. He thought of Lena Ortiz, Ariana, and the many generations who had endured hardship on Erebus 4. They had kept hope alive through centuries of darkness, and now, humanity had returned to the planet where it all began, not as lost children, but as a strong, united species ready to face the future. Next, Vorn whispered, looking at the sky, we show the galaxy what it means to rise. From the ruins of Earth, the humans planted a flag, one that symbolized survival, courage, and unity. The blue and green of the planet shone beneath the new stars of hope. For the first time in millennia, Earth was alive again, and the galaxy watched in awe, realizing that the story of humanity was far from over. The galaxy held its breath. For centuries, humans had been considered extinct. A tale for historians, a warning for young species, and a memory lost among the stars. Yet there they were. Not shadows, not whispers, but living, thriving, and united. Earth had been reclaimed. Erebus 4 continued to flourish as a hub of innovation and exploration. Humanity's fleets had expanded, carrying explorers, engineers, and teachers to distant systems. They had proven that survival was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater. Captain Elias Vorn stood aboard the Spirit of Unity, the flagship of the combined human fleet. Ships from Erebus 4 and Earth sailed together in perfect formation. Each carried crews trained not for war but for rebuilding and cooperation. Coordinates set for the Outer Rim, Vorn said. His voice was steady, filled with determination. We will meet every lost world. We will ensure no human is left behind. Lieutenant Marine nodded. The colonies we've already found are thriving. Others will join us soon. Vorn looked at the stars. Every light held a possibility, every dark void a challenge. Humanity had faced impossibility before and had prevailed. This would be no different. Far across the galaxy, the Alliance Council watched. Many races were still wary, but all could not deny what was happening. Humans were not conquering. They were healing. They were inspiring. Selna, the Cathari scholar, addressed the council. Humans are not a threat. They are proof that life, when guided by hope and unity, can survive anything. We should learn from them. Some council members resisted. They feared that a species so resilient could disrupt the balance. Yet even among them, curiosity and admiration grew. Humanity was becoming an example of what could be achieved when determination met compassion. On the flagship, Vorn activated the communication network. A broadcast went out to every known human colony, every listening alien station, and every world that had been touched by humanity's recovery. We are here. We remember, we endure. Together, we will rebuild what was lost and create what has never existed before. The words traveled faster than light, reaching the ears of all who would listen. In colonies lost for centuries, humans emerged from hiding. Communities that had thought they were the last discovered that they were part of something much larger. Humanity was no longer scattered. They were united. The fleet reached the outer rim, where some of the oldest colonies had fallen into ruin. Human ships landed carefully, using drones and explorers to assess conditions. On a cold, distant planet, they found survivors huddled in caves, afraid of the dark and the universe that had forgotten them. When Captain Vorn and his crew approached, the survivors could hardly believe their eyes. Humans in shining ships, bringing supplies, knowledge, and reassurance. Children clung to their parents as tears flowed freely. "You are not alone," Vorn said gently. "We have come for you." Humanity remembers. The team worked tirelessly, repairing shelters, restoring water and energy, and teaching new methods for growing food. The survivors of that long-forgotten colony laughed, cried, and began to dream again. Humanity was returning, and this time it would not vanish. News of these efforts spread quickly. Across the galaxy, races that had once considered humanity extinct were now watching closely. The human approach, one of cooperation, rebuilding, and respect, inspired admiration and even gratitude. The Alliance Council could no longer deny the truth. Humanity had returned not as conquerors but as creators. They were changing the galaxy by proving that survival alone was not enough. What mattered was purpose, unity, and hope. Selna spoke again. They were told it was over. But they are showing us that no end is final. Humanity proves that life itself can rise from the ashes. Back on Earth, cities continued to bloom. Forests were planted, rivers purified, and communities built. Children played in streets that were once rubble. Teachers told stories of survival. And scientists worked on ways to expand human knowledge further. The largest of the new cities, called Unity, became a hub for innovation. Humans and aliens alike came together to solve problems that had once seemed impossible. From energy systems to starship design, the lessons of survival were being applied to create a new era. The pinnacle moment came when Captain Vorn assembled leaders from all human worlds and allies aboard the Spirit of Unity. Holographic maps of the galaxy surrounded them, highlighting each colony, each recovered world, and every network of life that had been touched by humanity's return. "This is what we have achieved," Vorn said. "We were lost, scattered, and nearly gone, but we endured. Now we are one species again, connected across the stars. Our strength is not in war, but in hope, in unity, and in the courage to rise when everything has fallen." There was silence, then applause. Leaders, scientists, and explorers from human and alien worlds alike stood together. Humanity had not only returned, they had become a symbol of perseverance and courage for the entire galaxy. The first human festival in centuries was held across Earth and Erebus IV simultaneously. Music, lights, and laughter filled cities that had been silent for centuries. Stories of survival were told by elders. Children learned the histories of their ancestors, of Lena Ortiz, Ariana Ortiz, and the countless others who had carried humanity through the dark times. Ships of the Dawn Vanguard flew overhead in formation, creating patterns of light across the skies. Humanity celebrated not conquest, but life, resilience, and togetherness. Even the Alliance Council, once wary and dismissive, began to participate. They sent delegates to witness humanity's achievements firsthand. They marveled at the spirit and ingenuity of a species thought extinct. Selna, observing from her Cathari vessel, smiled. "They thought it was over," she said softly. But humanity proved them wrong. The galaxy was changing. Other species began to emulate humanity's approach: cooperation over conflict, rebuilding over destruction, and hope over despair. The humans had set an example that transcended their own survival. In the skies of Earth, the sun rose over a planet reborn. Green forests stretched across plains that had once been deserts of stone. Rivers sparkled in sunlight. Cities hummed with life. Humanity had reclaimed its home and, more importantly, had shown that no challenge was too great when a people worked together. Captain Vorn looked down from the bridge of the spirit of unity, seeing children run beneath the banners of humanity. He remembered the stories of the old Ark of Dawn, the first survivors, and the long years on Erebus IV. "We have come full circle," he said softly. "From the ashes of our past, we have built the promise of the future. We endure, we rise, we inspire." And so humanity stood tall among the stars. Once thought lost, they had returned stronger, wiser, and united. They had brought hope to worlds and inspired civilizations. They had shown that no darkness is eternal, and that even when everything seems over, life, courage, and determination can prevail. In every corner of the galaxy, the name human was spoken with respect, admiration, and awe. They were no longer just survivors. They were the living proof that resilience and hope could overcome the greatest challenges. And on Earth, under the blue sky that had finally returned to shimmer above green forests and sparkling rivers, humanity raised their banners and sang their songs. "We are here, we endure, we rise." The stars listened, and the galaxy knew. Humanity was not finished. They had only just begun.